So enough from me. Let's hear it from the superfan. Please welcome Rachel Shelton.
Hello. Thanks for that intro. Thanks for having this lecture series. Hallwalls and John for inviting me.
Thanks for lecturing.
Anytime. Like you said, it's really nice to not have to talk about your own work, and then you're free to just be excited about somebody else's. So I'm sure most people in here know who Bill Maggio is, but if you don't, he's an artist and I didn't know a musician from Buffalo. I learned in his studio recently that his skills are quite wide-ranging, but what we see of his work is drawing and painting based. He taught for a lot of his career, but now is focusing on his studio practice and is making an insane amount of paintings. So I became familiar with Bill's work at 1120, and I originally planned to make this talk kind of about how Bill's work is a good example of taking time to employ some slow looking and actually spend time with one piece of work for minutes at a time. However, I recently worked on his website, and through going through his series from the 80s on, I really saw this interesting trajectory of how the work changed and how it built up into what it is now. So I think I'm going to focus on that, how the older works translated into this current style. So I'll go through quickly just a few of the older ones because there are so many. And then we'll look at when the abstract work started, and then a quick look at some of what's in the Birchfield, but you have to go see the rest of it yourself. So, this is a piece from an early series. It's made in 1980, the Facade series. It's called Wall Marks. It's a drawing on paper. When I was at Bill's studio talking to him, we talked a lot about teaching philosophy, and Bill said that he is a believer in the idea that drawing is the basis for all other process, and I think this is super visible in his work. The earlier series are representational, a lot of figurative work, some text-based, and something to pay attention to is that there's still all these textures and sort of ambiguous context in the background that built into what the work looks like now. Another thing that carries all the way through is that the work is just, it's very emotional from the, 3 decades of work I've seen. Sort of, you get a sense of working through some things, thinking through the struggles of life, and I think it's pretty evident. So this is another one. It's from the People series. It's called Judge. Again, emotive, using light and dark to communicate the emotion and kind of capturing a relationship in a moment. Bill has a lot of coils in various series, and I think one of the most interesting things about the coils is how I perceive that they've translated into the current mark making techniques. And again, it kind of just shows that really strong basis in drawing. This piece, I actually just saw one of these in person for the first time 2 days ago. They're much larger than it seems. Rare bits of color, again with the coil, but something about this that I think comes in later is the sort of disturbed surface, interrupted composition, in here quite literally because it's collage, but this is from 1999. Also from 99 is from the Decoy series, and this background I think is like exactly what Bill's paintings look like now. if the rest weren't here. It also does some things that Bill does in his paintings that's broken up into panels. There's a certain amount of repetition, sort of ambiguous mark making. This is from 2000, from the Deception series. Again, broken up, a sort of unclear context, but what I really like about this is that it's all really still. It's clearly moments of things in motion, but, you know, Bill taught photography, and I feel like more than anything, photography is capturing a moment, and I think that's what these drawings do. And again, with the black and white and the, you know, high contrast. So here's where we start seeing more rumblings of what the rest of the work looks like, kind of from here on out. 2004, it's from the series Slate. It's another work on paper. The mode of making these is very additive and then reductive and additive and reductive, and there's these scratches everywhere and erasure and still some representational, but I think we're headed towards you know, letting the emotions rule out the imagery a bit. You know, I read it as frantic and figuring a lot of things out. This piece is from the Wallmarks series. It's paint on paper. And I asked Bill how he got into painting rather than drawing, and it was like the most practical answer I've ever heard. He said that he just was ruining his paper because he was digging into it and manipulating it so much and putting on so many layers. So, you know, a canvas was the next step, and it makes perfect sense to me. Because you can't really do it with paper, I think on this one we've got a lot of masking and stenciling and building up of layers, but it's really, like, this is the one where we split Bill's website from early work to recent work. So here's where we start the abstract paintings. And from here on out, everything is paint on canvas, and it's often wrapped around board. I think, you know, there's a lot of writing about this, and I won't go into it too much, but moving away from the recognizable imagery, I think, I hate this word, there's like a purity to using just abstraction to communicate something. The work from here is pretty much just black and white. It's, without the images, I think it just, you shed some of the baggage that you have to dig through when you're trying to communicate directly with your audience, and allow for this more instinctual read, which is everything from here on out. I think you can go to and just not think before you feel, and then think later. And so here's where a lot of these marks from the backgrounds of the other drawings come into play. This piece is from the Vestige series. There's like so much to look at in here. There's all these scrapings. You've got horizontal marks, vertical marks, organic marks. There's this thick and thin, different areas of application, and with a lot of Bill's work, there's this sort of concentration somewhere, but it's never the end point when you're viewing. This is one of the ones that's stretched, and then there's a, you know, a wood panel in the back, and they're just like incredibly solid. Bill's paintings are like an object also. It's not just, you know, and part of this is because I've been lugging them around the gallery for a couple of days, but it really, it's true. They're very solid. This is a piece from the other side. It's number 21. The series is humongous. There's definitely more than 50 paintings, but this one I think is a really good example because there's so much built up, and like you can't cut corners when you're going to paint like Bill. It's just, you can't get that kind of texture without painting and painting and painting and using whatever, you know, technique to remove things and adding it on. I'm not going to say the work is about the labor, but it's definitely a part of it. And through the labor, you can see how much time it took. And I think if I had to guess that it's making paintings that are so process-based, making the painting is the thought process. It's where it allows you to think through whatever it is that you're working out at the time. In a lot of the white paintings, in all of the white paintings I've seen, there's a darkness in the background breaking through. Without it, it would just be this like textured meditative surface. But Bill digs through all the paint and lets that darkness come out. Obviously, you can let that dictate how you read it, but I think it's certainly light and dark. There's a clear read there. This is actually where I see the coils coming back into play in these small, organic, but they're a lot more frenzied. They're not so, perfectly rendered and not so recognizable. The Snagged series, I really like. I have a couple images in here from 2015. This is kind of Bill's only break from truly making, abstract works without anything recognizable. And there's a series of fences, and they range from being sort of, like rope fence to, there are some that are very clearly resemble metal, and we can't avoid the read of the fence. A fence keeps things in or out, and can be protective, exclusive, a barrier, division, a boundary, and I think that, these are 2015 and it just gets more relevant every day. Another from the Snag series, this was 2016. With some of the fences, there's a break, and you could read that as breaking them down or it just being more tangled. Some of them have sort of white centers where it looks like there might be a hole in the fence, which feel more hopeful. I think there might be one with hope in the title, actually, so probably where I got that idea from. Oh, okay. This is my favorite painting. It's hanging in the gallery. It's my favorite. I'm not even good at talking about it because I just like it too much. It's the soft dissipation of the marks on the edges and then the harsh, shadows in the center. It kind of feels like some sort of geological something. And it's not very still. It's definitely undulating and moving, and I just love this one. I love it. I look at it every day. This is from the Verbiage series. Another example of the black and the white. I think here especially, I read this as sort of like the black circles are these kind of looming elements underneath it. I kind of imagine like looking through ice. The white's not quite opaque. It's even with all its layers in the center, and it's a little difficult to see in this photograph, but it's just like, it's so thick in the center there. And there's just this darkness under the surface, either just waiting or slowly pushing its way up. It's kind of like ominously calm. I don't know. So this brings us up to the current body of work, which I saw a bit of a couple weeks ago in Bill's studio, and then again at the Birchfield. When I got to the Birchfield for the opening, I thought I was just gonna zoom in, see Bill's area really quick, head back out and take a stroll around everything, and I went into Bill's space, and some minutes later I realized I'd just been staring at the first painting that I came to, which made me realize what's so amazing about Bill's work is that we remind ourselves to slow down and take time with things, but Bill's work just does it for you. You don't need to think about it. It's such a meditation to look at. It's, even when the emotion in it is an unpleasant one, it's such a great viewing experience. Each of the abstract series seem to kind of contain its mark-making style. And I think this is a point, this is like a third step, because this series, there's all the marks in most of the paintings, whether it's subtle or not. It just seems like this amalgamation of everything that's been building up throughout all of the previous series. And I don't know, I just think that the emotion comes through in the works really completely. This piece is a 2-panel painting. It's split where the white line is. This is another one that just sucks you in. It's larger. Bill and I talked about that Rothko quote, that if you're looking at this formally, you're not really getting it. You have to just take in the emotion of the piece. So in this one, for example, I see a lot of time, sort of sense of exploration, pushing forward, movement through time, and it's hard to tell in here, but this middle part is so dark compared to the rest, and it loses the texture that it just feels like you could walk into it and keep going indefinitely. And it's got, you know, the little coil marks, it's got these striations, it's got the striations with the broken up, it's got the sort of rocky texture. And I feel like this one kind of just felt like looking at an abstracted, like a whole lifetime to me. Something I've noticed about Bill's work is that when he works, there's a sort of standard set of sizes, like 12 by 12, 24 by 24, 48 by 48, and then a few exceptions. But when Bill goes big like this, it's not for the purpose of being able to make bigger marks, it's just to pack more in. And I think it makes it an even more just sort of intense viewing experience. There's a little detail of the center. Just fades in there. Something Bill told me at his studio was really interesting. I didn't know he was a musician, classically trained. And Bill said that after years of making these paintings, he realized that he thinks he's making them the way you make music. It's sort of like writing the sheet music. And as soon as he said that, you can see it. There's the pace and the tempo is set. It's disrupted in a lot of places, and sort of, you know, the instruments change. But when you think about that, and you think about the time element and the labor, it makes sense that the composition is happening in more than one way. I really like about this piece that even though there's so much built up on here, you can still see the fibers, like the texture of the canvas. And also this sort of blurred top area. And all these little disruptions kind of make me think of how when you recall a memory multiple times, your brain just changes little tiny things. That's kind of just what this one feels like to me. So going back to the fences a bit, this one seems like you almost pushed through, but it's so dark, I don't know if that's a good thing. And then you look behind and there's all of these, you know, layers and layers of fence to push through. Nearby this piece, there was another one titled Things Not Seen, Global Warning, and I think that kind of set the tone a bit for the rest of the work you look at. It's kind of doomy, which I like. And there's, you know, a sense of kind of just something bad, but then the white in the work is always just a little shining moment. This is the piece I found myself staring at after a few minutes. Again, just like unconscious, just meditating on something. This one really, I like this one a lot. It looks like it's just woven together with these marks. And you've got, again, the variety of the organic squiggles and the striations. And, you know, a lot of them have some washing, done. But I think what's so successful about this and a lot of the others is that there's no resting spot for your eye. You can just keep looking at it. There's not a place that you land that doesn't pull you back up and around and through. This is the last piece. I really, really enjoy this one. It kind of just sinks in and out. The texture is great. There's this degradation happening, a sort of fraying, metaphorically and actually. It's gorgeous. And I feel with this one like I kind of figured out one of the main reasons that I connect with this work so well is it feels like if you look into a cave and you're shining your flashlight and the things that are protruding or closest to you are visible and tangible and you can kind of see what's happening. But then there's all of this stuff going on in the background. There's all this blackness. You don't know how deep it might go or what's in there. It's the unknown. And I think that that's kind of what it's like to look at Bill's paintings, especially the darker ones, because there's these moments of clarity that dissolve into the unknown. And because Bill's work seems like it's really just a process of working through something in each painting, you get the sense that there's questions, but there aren't really answers. There's not really any resolution, a lot of wrestling, and I think that just totally illustrates the human experience. So with that, I think I'll stop. Thanks.
I know I claimed this was a series where you talk about the work of someone else, but I wanted to ask you, knowing your work, the little bit that I do, and your use of neutral tones and ambiguous imagery and a sense of texture that comes out of printmaking, there seems like there's affinities that you feel directly with Bill's work in terms of what you're doing. Not that you're going to be a painter and do this kind of stuff, but the kinds of images and ideas that you're pursuing are things that you see him achieving.
Mm-hmm. Building your own visual language and vocabulary is something I focus on a lot, which obviously is exactly what's happened through the last 28 years or whatever since that first slide. Yeah. I will say I didn't know Bill's work when I started this current body of work.
I wanted to make a comment about, I saw the work at the Birchfield and I was mesmerized by it as well. It seems as though he uses the grain of the wood in his works also. Does it?
Occasionally, I don't want to say too much, Bill can answer this, but occasionally there's something in the background that Bill paints over, but actually the first layer of paint builds up a huge texture that he sort of manipulates before it dries, and the rest of the painting is based off of that.
Okay.
Yes, Bill?
I think I can answer that. The wood panel, hi, the wood panel is there as a support. So, and it actually doesn't have any grain, it's a plywood. And it's a mahogany plywood, which is a very tight grain. But it's only a support because of the scraping. Without that,
then you couldn't,
I couldn't
do
poke a
what
hole
you
in
do.
the canvas.
Right. It's just so beautiful.
Thank you.
Good.
Sorry,
Oh,
question.
yes.
So I think, John wasn't alone in his feeling of, walking into the 1120 exhibition and feeling like it resonated on a level that is the kind of feeling you might find in the museum space. But I guess I have a question about what that was like for you guys to arrange, because there are these moments when we focus on individual works, right? They impact us because we're drawn into them and we project and they project back and they become these emotional moments. But I think it says something differently when you have an exhibition that does that almost from the moment you walk in, right? And then there are these threshold moments with the work that pull you in that are great, but there's still this like amazing, or I just, I think a lot of people were struck by the way that piece by piece and as a whole, the exhibition held together. So I just wanted, maybe you could speak to what it's like to fall in love with these individual pieces, but then arrange them in a way that allows them all to kind of elevate each other.
Well, I was still in grad school when that happened, so I was not working with John at that time.
Okay.
I've heard a little bit about the process, but not enough to really answer that question. I've arranged small amounts of Bill's work at a time, and the only thing I can really say is that there's so much, especially in the later series, connection between them that it's really not that hard to find everybody a buddy,
Well, the work does curators favors,
Yeah.
John Fadden, what was your experience?
Well, it was fairly easy. Bill was involved. It was actually quite an enjoyable experience. We spent a whole evening there, and we did have some help from our friends Scott Propriak and Bob Scalise. I would be remiss to not mention their names, but I think it was Bob's idea to lay out the grid of the small squares. And the other work, I think it just we wanted to not group things too close together and just respect the different color textures. And we did have more pieces that were predominantly black than white, so it was sort of fun to put those together. But I mean, Bill really kind of knew the relationship the pieces had, so we were there. It was fun. Good night. So, thank you.
I want to reiterate something Rachel talked about earlier, and I'm sure Aaron felt this, I'm sure John felt this, is that mesmeric quality. Okay, so as art professionals, as curators, as people with cold hearts that look at a lot of work with condescension in this very quickly. No, I mean, when you look at a lot of work, and even as an art audience, you go to a lot of shows, you look at a lot of work, you know that you look at things sometimes quickly. It's not because they don't merit your attention, it's because you get it quickly, you're used to that language, and you ingest it quickly. And it is kind of freakish with Bill's work that it does stop you in your tracks a little, because when that first 11:20 show was on, I was in there at the opening, and I'm like chatting, and I'm like, my eye keeps wandering back to something, and then I'm like walking closer to it, and it literally had that effect. That's very hard to achieve artistically. You have to work a long time. We had a Leila Ali show in our gallery a few months ago, and she was talking to some students from Nichols, and one of the things she was talking about, she said, as an artist, you're controlling the viewer. You want to decide how far away that you want them to be from your piece. How big you make the images, what quality the text and surface has, whether you want them to stand here or stand here. And, I don't think the kids had ever heard an artist talk like that. And it's that, it's that thing there, that weird alchemical, mysterious thing that is super hard to do well. And, so Rachel expressed that. I wanted to reiterate it because I had that experience with Bill's work too, and I'm sure John has, and Aaron, and many of you have seen it. But it's rare, So even though there's a lot of great art that doesn't do that in the same way, that just sort of locks you in. So.
Yes.
Well, first of all, I think your presentation was just marvelous.
Thank you.
I see Bill's work in the studio as he's working. When I walked into John's gallery, I said, wow. It was just to see it, it was like, that's where it should be. It should be shown like that. It was beautiful, and I really, really enjoyed you and his work.
Thanks. Good? Oh, okay.
I'm just curious what you see in that piece, and whether or not, when you started it, it was the intention to finish it the way it looks, or whether or not it just evolved that way. Like, I'm captivated by
This was
this.
a totally different piece, and I never liked it. And I just pulled it out one day and saw something different, and I pulled it out. And there it is. But in reference to, or touching on what John had said about that mesmerizing kind of quality, in it, I want, what I try to do is to attract from a distance and pull people in, embrace people, embrace the viewer. I'm hoping to do some much larger pieces. The problem is they're so damn heavy to move. But I'm going to do it for the next show, which is going to be at the end of the year. But I just like to get into it. I don't wear gloves. I'm off my hands, I'm telling you. My poor wife. I don't know, it's enjoyable, but I do get lost. And it's a tough thing to know when to stop. But this one just happens. Actually, it's 2 years this piece took. And people say, how long does it take you to do a certain something or other? As long as it's in my studio, it's in progress. It's in process. So once it's gone, then it's gone. But this one here in particular, John, I don't know if that answers your question.
See, I see a person moving into the unknown with a city on his back, or her back. That's what I see.
City. I picked up on a map, sort of a overview, but I don't think,
It's not.
we're not supposed to look for any objects.
We're
We're not looking for, I was gonna say, Bill's not gonna get, he's not gonna be happy if you start looking for objects.
Things not seen. It's a feeling. It's a faith. It's a.
Okay.
And that's what I'm trying to show. I don't want any reference to any object. I want a reference to your emotions. And the sweat's so personal to everybody.
Texture.
And I'm trying to keep it pure and very simple, black and white house paint. It's honest, it's basic, it's organic, and it's the result of 60 years of working.
It's so beautiful.
And Rachel, again, you did a wonderful. You made me aware of things that I wasn't aware of, but you were spot on.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.